Yeah, yeah, we're good.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar in the news part 4. My name is Sierra Martinez, and I'm Logarithm's digital marketing specialist. I'm going to pass things over to your speakers today, Jake Haldeman and Mike Villavicencio, in just a minute. But first, I have a few housekeeping items I want to run through. So there's a couple of things for you to keep in mind throughout this broadcast. First, everyone is muted to ensure audio quality. With that said, we're here to answer any questions that you have. So if there's anything you'd like to ask our panelists related to today's topics, feel free to send those questions to the chat feature at any time. We built in time specifically at the end for Q&A, so go ahead and send those questions in throughout the presentation. We've estimated about 30 minutes to an hour of content for you, so stay on until the end of the presentation to get the most out of our session. And then please complete the polls at the end of the session to receive free exclusive content. Now it's time to meet your panelists. So our agenda is pretty straightforward today. We're going to turn it over to Logarithm channel sales engineers, who will dive into a couple recent security news topics, which they will reveal in just a few moments. Our speakers will share insights and take your most pressing questions at the end. And with that, I'll pass it over to your speakers. Jake and Mike, you could take it away.
Thank you, Sierra. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Jake.
How we doing? Mike, they brought us back for a 4th series of this. What's going on?
I mean, apparently something we did, something we said was successful enough that people were willing to watch through the cringiness. So I'm really happy you guys are here, but also we're always trying to bring you the latest in the news, cybersecurity related. So again, my name is Mike Villavicencio, one of the channel sales engineers here based out of New England, and I'll go ahead and pass over to Jake.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm also a channel sales engineer, oddly enough. Not out of New England. I'm here in Denver, near the Logarithm headquarters. It's exciting times. It's really fun to be able to do this. Obviously, many of us are already in security and pay attention to what's going on in the news. But it's been really interesting to be able to take a little bit of time out to look at some of the new pressing security threats and news and talk about it a little bit. So with that, why don't we jump right in and see what's going on here, Mike? What are the topics we're going to cover today?
Yeah, we're going to go over to 2 topics that I'll be talking about today. One is the massive loss of revenue and money through a epidemic called pig butchering. I'll explain what that is in a bit here. And then I'll go over to Microsoft Teams vulnerabilities. Really not vulnerabilities, it's just configurations that we need to be mindful of. So I know Microsoft Teams kind of gained a lot of popularity over COVID. So it's definitely something I felt needs to be talked about. And then how about your topics there, Jake?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm excited to hear about that. I remember when Zoom was like the savior during COVID, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of security issues with it, right? And it's easy to think Teams is perfect, flawless, things like that, because it's from Microsoft. They've never released something bad, Windows Vista. But really excited to hear what you have to say about that stuff. For my topics today, I wanted to talk a little bit about Okta. They had some claims recently in the news about password extraction risks, and they've kind of gone on to try to dispute it. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. And then the other one is a good friend of ours, Atlassian. They just recently went through several series of severe critical vulnerabilities, and now we're back at it again. So going to dive into that a little bit more about a hard-coded password leak. So should be really interesting stuff today. But let's jump into this pig butchering. Is that, like, as a pork eater, do I need to be concerned?
Yeah, we're changing up the topic today. We're going to show you how to roast an entire pig, and that would be a lot of fun. So no. There is a legitimate cyber scam going around, and I'll cover that here. So yeah, just to kick it off on this particular topic, and I'll explain it briefly. So what's happening is cyber criminals are targeting victims who fall to complex crypto scams, and people are reporting they've lost hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in a scam known as pig butchering. And the name comes from a heavily scripted, human-intensive process that's using fake profiles on dating apps, social media to lure these people in who are investing into these elaborate scams. In a more visceral sense, pig butchering means it's fattening up the prey before the slaughter. So that's where that comes from, and it's kind of just came about because after I describe this to you, it'll make a lot more sense. But we're looking at this and we see that the fraud is named for a way scammers feed their victims with promises of romance and riches before cutting them off and taking their money. So the FBI had warned this back in April 2022, and they're saying it's run by a fraud ring of cryptocurrency scammers who are mining dating apps and social media for victims, and the scam is becoming very, very popular. The more prevalent pig butchering scams today involve sophisticated cryptocurrency investment platforms. So these investors are invariably seeing fantastic returns on their deposits. And then when it comes time for them to withdraw the funds, that's when they strike. That's when the pig butchering happens, right? Pig butchering is, but even for those who pay the phony levies, never see their money gain. The next thing is these scams are usually in an odd fashion. They come in form of messages from dating apps, even SMS, such as a text message saying that an Uber ride was never showed, or sometimes the users see a message from a complete stranger about a planned meet for coffee and greet them. Generally, the goal is to gain enough interest for the victim and then engage and respond. There is a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County by the name of Erin West. And this is in Northern California, and she's saying that these people are forced to perpetrate these scams and have a guided script. So in China, I was reading earlier in the article here, they were mentioning that there's a bunch of people being kidnapped in China, places like Cambodia as well, and they're forced to read these scripts and forced to scam these people, and they're very complex scams, scripting and all that stuff. So we're seeing sometimes, victims will be like this woman, or rather, they're forced to do these things because they're being told, like, you're not going to see your family if you don't do this, if you don't obey us, stuff like that. But West was also saying the pig butchering is becoming quite sophisticated, and they're targeting educated people here. So I'm sorry, Jake.
No, Michael, why don't you finish that thought? This is really interesting because as you're talking about this sounds like they're building a business. They have playbooks. Here's what you do. In the article that district attorney, she's like, if they're divorced or single mom, this is the play. They're definitely documenting the process. They're making it repeatable. It's almost applying business tactics to an attack. And I think it's really interesting because it makes a lot of sense, but it also means that we have to be on our toes, right? Yeah. Before this meeting, we were talking a little bit about how this article reminded me of the Netflix series Tinder Swindler, where really nice guy would introduce himself to a lady on Tinder, and he would then escalate to start getting money out of them. Hey, my credit cards got shut down. I need to pay for something. Can you add me to your credit card really quick? Can you increase that balance really quick so I can do my, big spender money stuff and I'll pay you back? It's just, it's a playbook. They know exactly what they say. They know how to get that emotional response, and then they can take advantage of people. And we really have to be on edge as humans that, that story sounds so sad, but I'm not going to fall for it. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and in the case of the woman who has, she was divorced and she has 3 daughters. That's some of the people that we're talking about in this article, and you can feel free to go to the article yourself on the Krebs on Security article. But this poor woman, she lost her husband due to COVID. She got lonely afterwards. She started chatting with people online, and then ended up giving away her entire retirement. That's a different level of evil right there, right? Yeah. And then meanwhile, there's a person by the name of Courtney Nolan says she lost over $5 million in this investment scheme, and she's an investment finance specialist. So these scammers are vicious. They know what they're doing. It's a very elaborate scheme to get these people enticed just enough to say, well, let's go ahead and have a chat. Hey, or maybe they post something on social media and they say, hey, by the way, I see you had a Starbucks coffee there. It looks pretty fancy. I got into crypto investments this way too. when I was at a Starbucks once, and then they get them enticed through that way and say, oh, really? Show me how to do that. And then it also calls out that once the victim starts getting skeptical or tries to withdraw the funds, that's it. That's right there. That's where the scammers strike. They're often told that they have to pay high taxes on gains before they can have their funds unlocked. They're telling all this to Vice News, and then they also say that the scammers will also try to get any last payments out of the victim by exploiting all the sunk cost fallacies and dangling huge profits in front of them. And there's a lot more to the article. Feel free to go read it. It's really sad, unfortunately. But just kind of before I continue on, finish up this topic, is if you don't realize what's going on here, folks, this is a really, really complex social engineering scheme we're seeing in front of us. So again, these are very educated, very sophisticated people that are being targeted as well. So it's not like, oh, it won't happen to me. It is important to be mindful of this stuff. And here are some of the common elements behind the pig butchering scam. So I said dating apps is one. So the big pig butchering attempts are common on dating apps, but they can almost always begin with some sort of communication, including SMS text messages. Apps like WhatsApp. In virtually all documented cases of pig butchering, the target moved fairly quickly into getting the victim into WhatsApp and communicating through there. And then no video. The scammers will come up with all these excuses not to do a video call. They're almost always going to be doing a text message exchange, but they always refuse to get on camera. And then the investment chit chat. Your contact will eventually claim to have inside knowledge about cryptocurrency markets and can help you make money. So finally, the FBI's tips on avoiding these scams is never send money, trade, or invest based on advice for some stranger you just met online. I mean, that sounds pretty obvious, but you can fall into something like that pretty easily depending on how they finesse the conversation. Don't talk about your current financial status to anyone, especially untrusted people you just don't know. Don't talk about how much you make. Don't provide any banking information, social security number, copies of your passport or ID, or any other sensitive information that can be tracked back to you. The digital fingerprint is a real thing. And if you have an online investment or trading site that is promoting unbelievable profits, in other words, if it sounds too good to be true, you have to avoid it. And then finally, be cautious of individuals who claim to have exclusive investment opportunities and urge you to act fast. That's a telltale sign of a classic scammer move.
Yeah, Mike, this sounds like social engineering at a whole new level. Sophisticated playbooks, targeted people, and then, of course, being able to use those emotional responses. I recently lost a loved one too. And, just there's so many things that can be said and done to really trigger us as humans, providing that emotional response.
Yep.
And we forget to look at the other indicators that it is too good to be true. We don't have any way to verify this person or their identity. There's so many things like that this article is calling out that, there are lots of red flags, and even, the red flags that aren't even listed. If you don't feel good about something, don't do it. Just because somebody's pressuring you to do something, regardless if it's money or, installing software, anything, you got to think twice. You have to take your own actions, take control of your own actions and not let somebody bully you or peer pressure you into doing something. All of us can fall victims to this. It's easy, tying it to families, tying it to, being in need or struggles. We all relate. And, they're just looking for ways like that to take advantage of us. It's a harsh world, but we have to be careful. I'm 100% for compassion and support, but we just have to be careful how we go about it.
Yeah, there's all sorts of ways you can be tricked, and it can happen to anyone, anytime. And I'll just as a quick little story, this happened to me. I unfortunately did not lose money through investments, but a social engineering call came to my cell phone in the summer of 2019. This was a classic IRS scam. So at first it did sound a little legit, and I heard keywords in there like, oh, wow, how do they have that information about me? And it was where the woman on the phone had a clearly non-English accent, another country. So that was a first red flag. The next one was, this is our final attempt to contact you. We've contacted you many times. Like, no, you haven't. And they said, if you don't take care of it now, we'll send the police to your home. I'm like, okay, all right, the jig is up. This is obviously fake. And so they're just telling me I owe like thousands of dollars in tax money, and the truth is I didn't, still don't. And it ended with me telling them, look, you just called the wrong person. I know what you're trying to do, and I'm going to report this number anyway. So ended the conversation there, and of course nothing came about it. They just tried to intimidate me into paying some sort of fee or something. So
you are still wanted by the IRS, though, it sounds like, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you got to pay your taxes, right?
No,
So,
but those are really good points. That they're going to try fear. That's a really good tactic. And there's simple things to remember. IRS isn't going to call you; they're going to send certified mail. Same with like Microsoft. They're not going to tell you to call them when you have a virus. They don't want that type of inbound call numbers. So we have to put a level of critical thinking onto any events like that you get presented with. So good call, Mike. Not giving in. I almost had your bank account information. I was so close.
Oh, might have the chance later on after the call. We'll see. But
all right, Mike. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, let's go into the next topic, and this one will be pretty brief. I just want to get to the bulky parts of it. So, question to the people on the webinar here: do you use Microsoft Teams in your organization? Again, like I mentioned, it's a very popular app. It does really well. It's based off of Skype and writing off those developments. But it's been proven to be very popular over the pandemic. It does really well for a lot of businesses. But cybersecurity researcher Darius Pogliatis, it's a very hard last name to pronounce, much like my last name. But this person has discovered that relying on default Microsoft Teams settings can leave really high-value users vulnerable to social engineering attacks. So attackers could create group chats with state officials, masquerading as their bosses, maybe someone who has high status within the organization. And really the critical point here is relying on these default settings in Microsoft Teams leaves users open to threats from external domains. Misconfigurations here can prove very perilous to high-value targets here. So a little bit about the numbers here. So there's over 270 million active users monthly, including government institutions using the software in the US, UK, Netherlands, Germany, Lithuania, and a lot of other countries. So Darius mentions that we saw that attackers could rather convincingly impersonate a high-ranking state official and could possibly strike up a conversation, bullying the victims into believing they're discussing sensitive topics with a superior. And before I finish that quote, this is important because what's happening with Ukraine right now and a lot of the politics around that. And they're really close to Belarus and a lot of neighboring countries there. So he goes on to say that skilled attackers could do a lot of harm with this capability, as he was talking to Cybersecurity News. And in a POC, or a proof of concept, the team decided to test the exploits on the Lithuanian Parliament's Committee on National Security. They were posing as the Prime Minister. They started adding users based on their email addresses into a single group chat. And then the problem lies within government relying on default or near default settings for external access on Microsoft Teams. So that's the key right there, is the configuration for external access can easily be manipulated. And it really just depends on how you set up your domain access for those users. The advisory also mentioned that it's very easy to impersonate anyone on the Teams app, so they can find other credentials just doing quick queries. They didn't really get into too much of that, but they just mentioned how easy it was to do that. So after doing this, staff can find it very hard to confirm the identity of third parties. And fortunately, the quick fix here is to modify external access to change the settings that only allow users from specific external domains to contact officials or people with high status. So,
Mike,
yeah,
this reminds me, it's a little different, but the LastPass attack we talked about last call, our last webinar,
right?
They gained access to the incident response channels, and just hearing you talk about this and how critical is that like if these communication channels are compromised, anything can happen. Now all of a sudden it's easy to masquerade yourself as somebody else. It's easy to understand what's going on. It sounds like, and I'm going to talk about this in one of my articles about Okta, is knowing what your default settings are. It's so critical because it's leaving you exposed in this situation. So this is a pretty interesting article, Mike. This is really good fun.
Yeah, thanks. usually like to go on Krebs on security because every now and then he'll have a really good article or his team publishes something that's worthy of talking about. This one is more critical, so I hope everyone learned something about this one. But I'll finish it up with what they discovered is they fortunately found no breaches within the Lithuanian parliament after doing a little bit more research and kind of digging around. But additionally, on all of this, we at Logarithm have Vice configurations to ingest API log sources from Microsoft Teams. So you can view the actual configurations, if settings have been changed, user session data, so on and so on. I can provide the link for our documentation on that and how we pull that. But just as a means to say, hey, how do you protect yourself from this, or how do you monitor this kind of stuff? We do have a link to explain that.
I'll also throw out, this is a good use case for UEBA.
It is.
Putting those high-ranked officials under monitoring, and even like administrators and managers, things like that, so that, hey, you detect that all of a sudden this chat is being initiated from a different country, or whatever the use case might be. Adding that UEBA monitoring will give you a level of insight that you wouldn't normally have to help protect against this. Obviously, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix everything, but it's going to give you a faster detection than not. That's for sure.
Yeah, and this does involve users, so that is really critical. Good call out there, because you do want to look for those changes in baseline behavior. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we got the next topic for you, Jake, or the next two with you.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. Okta. So after the LastPass attack back in January or February, there's an organization called Authomize that said, I wonder what vulnerabilities are in Okta in the application. And so they've been doing extensive research the last few months, trying to better understand what type of exploits there are available. They came up with an interesting one. Essentially what they found is that there's a chance that an attacker, if they could gain app admin access to certain applications, that they could then redirect how the configuration URLs are handled, and could potentially receive plain text password hashes. So first off, this is a password hash. It's not like it's being completely plain text passwords, which is kind of what the article originally implied, but it looks like it's all hashed. But also the requirement is you're going to have to get that app admin access. The use case that they kind of laid out was financial services. Compromise somebody's account, gain that app admin access, because they might just be a financial advisor or something like that, but they have admin rights into the application. And then they could change some of the settings to redirect where those passwords are being sent, and it could be captured. This is a really interesting use case, and Okta kind of dismissed it. They actually disputed this. They said, oh, no, this isn't a real thing. This is as intended operations. The good thing is that they did agree to investigate further. The thing I disliked is that they said, that there is no real standard policy for shipping hashed passwords correctly, and securely, which I kind of raised that BS card, and I thought, well, you're an IDPA or IDP vendor, you should help establish that. Obviously that's going to mean that any third-party application would have to play along with that same standardization. But at the end of the day, that's where federated logins really come in.
Hey, Jake.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. That since I didn't have a chance to go through the article, I definitely got the cliff notes. But I think in the article it mentions a little bit about why Okta didn't decide to list it as or publish it with a CVE. Could you explain why they, how they got to that approach, why they got to that conclusion?
Yeah, the basic understanding I got, Mike, is that when they looked at this, that this is the application performing as intended. The third-party applications aren't being securely developed. They're not leveraging single sign-on or federated logins. They're just doing essentially a password share, from the identity provider like Okta into the third-party applications. The only way that application can accept a login is just plain username and password. And so Okta's rebuttal essentially is, we're doing this as secure as that third-party application makes it. And so it's really outside their control. But this again comes back to that play of Okta should be pushing organizations like this to take better security measures. That they should say, hey, we really need you to offer single sign-on or federated authentication for a secure process here, because you are putting things at risk. So that's the general idea. That's why it's not a true CVE, because this is a proof of concept exploit. It's very niche, and at the end of the day, it's not Okta's fault that these third-party applications can't support better secure authentication processes. So one of the things that was curious about this is this something LastPass did? I don't think so. I don't think this was how they did it. But then the next question is, who will use this? Will this be an exploit that is taken advantage of? Unfortunately, it's something only time will tell. We have to wait and see if it is a viable attack approach. At the end of the day, it really is the third-party applications that are overlooking security. And we should we should hold them accountable. We shouldn't make that an acceptable excuse on either side. Yes. So, then one of the other thoughts I had that was interesting is they also believe that in this type of attack that they'd be able to modify the logs to hide the activity going on. This is something that is kind of interesting. I believe that most likely if you're logging to a SIM, you're going to get this. My interpretation of that phase of this attack is that they'd go in and clean out the existing logs or modify the existing logs. So if you're doing real-time logging into a SIM, the hope there is that they won't be able to modify those logs because they've been shipped out and they're in another system that they don't have access to. And so, I think it's really important to bring in logs from your IDP provider, Okta or Duo or any of those types of guys, even Azure AD authentication stuff. You need to make sure that's being logged so you can detect anomalies and strange behavior. And then, kind of like the Microsoft Teams thing, UEBA for security teams, for administrators, makes a lot of sense here. Be proactive in detecting when an administrator is acting strangely, so you can figure out if they are being compromised or if they're just going rogue and doing inappropriate behaviors. The other hard part with this is that we have to put a lot of trust in organizations like Okta. We have to trust that they're protecting our data, our credentials, without putting our integrity in question. Because at the end of the day, we're only as secure as Okta and our other providers are. So it can create a very, very hard relationship when we call them out and say, hey, we need to keep things secure. But they also need to be very responsive when that happens.
And it's worth calling out also, even Okta having their own controls of their own technology, then you have the other layer of attack surface layer rather, that adds more vulnerability or increases your chances of compromise. So Okta, as you may know, has a web extension for your web browser, and that web extension also has sensitive data that's sent to that app. So just to make our lives easier, but through that you're also relinquishing a little bit more of security. So just be mindful that these web extensions do, and for the most part, read your web session data, your passwords, what you enter into forms. So that can be manipulated, and just going beyond Okta, you're also opening up yourself to more attack surface. So just be mindful. I don't want to call it out there because I know some people use the Okta web extension.
And we're singling out Okta, but this is anybody. I remember a few years ago, LastPass, their browser extension had a lot of vulnerabilities, and they were very quick to respond. Within a day or so, they were releasing patches and updates. But you're absolutely right. In fact, another thing we were talking about before this call, Mike, is how it's easy to install browser extensions and not realize if it's vulnerable or if it's the correct one. Kind of tied into your previous conversation, I had a friend that lost a lot of Bitcoin because they're a compromised browser extension. It was their running theory. And, it can happen to anybody. And so being very vigilant, making sure you know what extensions are enabled, that if you're still using them, things like that is really important. Very good call out. I think one of the last things that's also important to note is that, and this actually again ties into that Microsoft Teams one, you need to be familiar with what default settings are. The Okta even specified, they're like, hey, if you don't like how this is configured, adjust your settings so it's not configured that way. Unfortunately, they didn't specify like here's a step-by-step guide or anything, but they did imply that you can adjust your configuration for any of your applications to make it more secure, even in situations like this. So know what those default settings are. It's easy to rush and deploy applications, especially in the time of COVID. A lot of companies were quick to roll out Zoom or Teams, and they may have forgotten to do a hardening process. And so it's definitely a good time for us to go back and say, hey, what are our default settings? What is enabled? Can external people reach out to us on Teams? Do we allow insecure communication with third-party applications in Okta? We need to know this so that we can understand where our risk level is as an organization. Mike, this is a pretty interesting article, and this is pretty ongoing too. With Okta disputing it, they did agree to put some engineering resources to making sure that things are being done correctly and securely. So I'm actually really curious to see if there's a follow-up on this. We'll see what happens in the next few months.
Interested to hear more. Yeah, if you do find anything else, maybe we'll do it on the next one.
Yeah, a good idea. All right, the next article I wanted to talk about today is about Atlassian. For those that don't know Atlassian, they produce a handful of different products. Some of their most popular ones is going to be Jira, a ticketing system. It's very popular with developers to track stories, user boards, and just track that whole development process. But then on the other side of that, they have a product called Confluence. Confluence is a very popular documentation tool. They have capabilities to publish to the internet. So you can have user-facing documents, you can have internal documents, just all around a really simple. It's like a wiki, but I think a lot easier to use. They have the idea of spaces, so you can have your IS team and a security team space. And then within there, each team can create documents, guides, resources. And they have a lot of really cool workflows. They make it really easy to build documentation. You can add warning banners and, just their whole process to make things look beautiful in an easy and manageable way. So it's a great product, very popular, but they just came out with a pretty big exploit. Apparently, about a week ago, they actually released a whole suite of patches. I think they had 2 known CVEs that were covered across almost all their products. I think it covered like 5 or 6 of their products. So they just released that last week. And then yesterday it comes out that there was another issue. They had hard-coded credentials in the database that have gone public. Essentially what they have is there is a add-on to Confluence, and it's called Questions. And the whole idea of this Questions for Confluence add-on is it makes it easier for people to be like, hey, how do you cover step 2 or, things like that. So you can have conversations on the pages. It ends up that product, Questions, was creating a disabled user account, very creatively named Disable System User, and it had a hard-coded password. And it ends up that this user was being added to a user group, like a default user group. And then that made it so it was possible to read restricted pages. Again, with Confluence, you can have public-facing and secured pages or, private pages. With the login, they could actually access those private pages. And so obviously this is a huge no-no, right? Hard-coded passwords is always a bad practice, not something you want to do, especially when that password goes public. Not ideal. And then, of course, to make things kind of uncomfortable, if you remove that Questions add-on, it doesn't remove the user from the database. So it's still there and can still access those pages. So Atlassian did provide documentation on how to see if you have that user, how to disable them. And they did release a fix, which does completely remove that user. So I thought this was really interesting because again, a lot of organizations use this. A lot of software tech companies use this because it's a very, very valuable and reliable tool. Documentation teams love it. So how do we secure against this, Mike? What are our steps? The first and obvious one I had was you want to monitor logins. You want to bring that into a system that can detect when a bad username like disabled system user is attempting to log in. I think that's step number one, right? That's just ground rules right there. Let's bring in logging. Let's monitor for suspicious login activity. After that, obviously we got to patch. You got to stay up to date. And it'd be actually interesting to explore if a web application firewall, WAF, would play well into this. Those obviously have some limitations in terms of like user login protection, but it could help us detect something like this. Again, we could build out rules to look for those types of login events. But I think at the end of the day, we just need to be diligent. When we leverage tools like this, just like Okta, we put a lot of trust and faith in the organizations. And when CVEs like this are found, we know that they're going to patch it, and we just got to be ready to roll out with the patches and be ready for any fallout that's tied to it, and understand the risk levels too. There's different approaches of how you can publish, how you share documents out. Maybe you need to reevaluate that and see if there is a way to narrow it down to narrow the focus of what could be exploited to just customer-facing documentation rather than all of it, things like that.
Jake, I think the only way this exploit could have been worse is if they named that user account God mode only, and it's just a little sad to see Atlassian's guilty of including that user account in hard coding passwords, because this just goes to show that it's important to have those your DevOps hardened as well. So going through the software development cycles, you got to have those places in check. So when you go to publish the apps or the application or binaries, you don't have this stuff happen, because this could have been avoided, but clearly it was not.
Yeah, I think it's easy sometimes. Build a proof of concept. You cut corners. People love it. You rush it to market, and you forget to review and clean up those cut corners. I know Logarithm, we're a software company, and then to add the pressure, we're a security software company. So it increases our risk level and makes it so we have to be even more diligent. And I know in our organization, over the last few years, we've really tightened down. More code scans, vulnerability assessments, just having security actively engaged in the software development cycle. I think that's really critical. Any software company should be doing that. And if they're not, they're definitely going to be putting their user base at risk. It might not be something quite this obvious. It could be something small. But if we aren't involving security in software development, it's going to give us a bad time at the end of the day.
Was that a South Park reference?
Yes, it is a South Park reference.
Excellent.
But we're not going to do French fries or pizzas. We're just going to do software patches.
That's right.
Yeah. So that way we do have a good time. But yeah, really interesting stuff this week in security. Every week it seems like we always have new vulnerabilities coming out, things like that. So it's so important for us to stay diligent, know what will impact us the most and how to respond. Honestly, after seeing that Teams thing, I'm curious what my organization policy is like. I want to go and look at that further now and see if there's something that needs to be done.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking maybe I will open up a ticket with support and just be like, hey, just FYI, this is a thing. So let's check it out.
And it's so easy for us to deploy software and wash our hands of it and think we're done. But it doesn't matter if it's Microsoft, Atlassian, Okta. We need to make sure that we're installing the latest sync tool or the latest components to maintain that security posture. It's not a set it and forget it world anymore.
That's absolutely true. And a couple of last thoughts on your last topic here. So do you think, and I feel that solutions like IAMs or PAMs would be helpful in this scenario, right? In tandem with using a SIM to log all this stuff, right?
Oh yeah, most definitely. The great thing with the PAM, password access, privilege access managers and things like that is it's going to help. But at the end of the day, Unfortunately, we're still at the bounty of these software vendors. We can't control them hard coding passwords, but we should have a good policy in place when we need to do service accounts to rotate passwords, to monitor who's touching those accounts, what those accounts are doing, things like that. You definitely need to have visibility into there.
Yeah, thanks for covering those. Yeah, good stuff. And it seems like Lapsus keeps coming back in our news articles, but it's worthy talking about. And with that, I think it kind of wraps up our topics. So we'll push it over to Ciara.
All right, thanks, Jake and Mike. Everyone, please take a moment to complete the following polls. Remember, if you complete all three, you'll receive free exclusive content after the webinar concludes. As you complete these polls, we may have a few questions, or Jake and Mike will take it away with some announcements.
Hey, Mike, I see one question in here. It's asking what's changed recently with Logarithm's cloud AI software. Can you fill us in on what updates, minor updates, major updates you know
of? So the Logarithm cloud software, really, it's a mirror copy of our on-prem solution, but there's notable features in the 7.9 release. So
Mike, I actually think they're talking about cloud AI. Didn't we rebrand that?
Yes, we rebranded it. Sorry about that. I heard cloud and I thought LR cloud, but yeah, for UEBA, it's recently rebranded from the old term cloud AI to now just Logarithm UEBA. But there's no changes, no major changes to the technology. We made improvements to the algorithms and the formulas used inside the machine learning capabilities, but overall, it's just gotten more enhancements over time. And Melissa Ruzzi, who's our product manager for UEBA, has been delivering those constantly. And I'm happy to entertain any demos or any updates on that on a demo if you'd like.
Yeah, one thing I thought was really interesting with Logarithm UEBA is that it's an extension really of the Logarithm Sim. It's just continuing the Logarithm Sim, but with more capabilities and features. So it's not adding a third-party software application or anything like that. It's taking the existing Sim product and then just expanding its capabilities to show UEBA data. It's bringing that feed in from the Logarithm cloud, if you will, where we're building those models and monitoring the log metadata. And then it's bringing those alerts into the client console, the web console of Logarithm. So, if customers are looking for UEBA products, it's a great opportunity to leverage an existing product, your Logarithm Sim. Of course, I'm assuming everybody here has a Logarithm Sim. And then you can add on that feature capability set without having to have a new user interface to learn and things like that. It's all built, all in one solution for all of your security needs. I love it. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, excellent to clarify exactly what our UEBA solution is doing. We're enabling the full capabilities, full functionality of UEBA because we already have a portion of that exists outside, out of the box with the SIM. So that's the notable thing there. We also have our previous product called MISNet rebranded as Logarithm NDR. So in case anyone had any questions about that, we also want to update you there as well.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Mike, the other thing I want to do while people are taking these survey polls is call out Rhythm World. I think both of us will be there in person giving presentations. So we'll be available for autographs, pictures, baby kisses, things like that.
Yep.
Or if you just want to tell us what we did wrong, we're available for that too. So come check us out. Logarithm's user conference, Rhythm World. Do you know the dates? I think it's like September 13th.
September 13th through the 15th.
Yeah, so that'll be here in Denver, Colorado, live in person. So come check that out if you can. I think it should be really good stuff. We're going to have a lot of, updates on our current product sets, previews into new products. There's a lot going on in the engineering side of Logarithm, and Rhythm World is going to be definitely a good place to go to learn and see a lot of that. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll pass it up to Ciara. Give a huge shout out to Ciara too. She's absolutely phenomenal. We love working with her, and just awesome side of the marketing team to help us out make these presentations possible. We really appreciate you, Sierra. We'll pass it over to you to wrap things up.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks again for everyone who joined today's webinar. We hope it was valuable. And if you think of any questions about what we've discussed today, feel free to email us at info@logarithm.com, or else connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and you can ask your questions there as well. Go ahead and search Logarithm, and you'll be able to find us pretty easily. All right. Thanks again, and hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll close out for the day.
Thanks, everyone.